My name is Hayley. I'm 28 years old, and I just found out I'm no longer considered part of my own family. Not officially, of course. No one hands you a document when they decide you're no longer welcome. They just stop telling you things. They start holding meetings without you. And one day, they open the door with a smile that slices cleaner than a knife and say the words that change everything. I stood on the porch of the house I grew up in, gripping a folder stuffed with Tuscany brochures and the itinerary I'd spent 2 years perfecting. It was supposed to be a surprise for my dad. His 60th birthday, his dream trip, our shared dream. But the moment the door opened, I knew something was wrong. My mother didn't greet me with her usual passive-aggressive hug. She didn't even fake her delight. She just looked at me like I was early to a party I hadn't been invited to. Her lips barely moved. Haley. No hi, no come in, just my name clipped and cold. Behind her, I saw Tyler, my older brother, perched on the edge of the couch, stiff as stone. Rebecca was next to him, pretending to scroll through her phone. No one looked at me. I, my voice caught. Is Dad home? Mom stepped aside without answering. Come in, we need to talk. I walked in like a guest in someone else's life. The house looked the same, but the air was thick, dense, like I'd just walked into a room where something terrible had already happened. We've all talked, my mother said, clasping her hands in front of her like she was delivering a eulogy, not a betrayal. And we've decided you're not invited to your father's birthday celebration. The silence after her words was louder than shouting. My mouth went dry. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. I'm sorry, what? You've taken over, Tyler said without looking at me. The trip, the planning, it's a lot. It's too much, Mom added, her tone flat. Too expensive, too complicated, too you. My pulse roared in my ears. I planned this for Dad, for his dream. I spent 2 years. We don't need the drama, Haley, Tyler interrupted, standing now. You always make everything about you. That was it. That was the moment I felt something snap. Years of biting my tongue, of being the outsider, the backup, the unnecessary one. I made it about him because no one else ever does, I shouted. You plan parties for yourselves and slap his name on the cake. This was his. Mom's smile returned, tight, cruel, victorious. And yet, he'll be celebrating without you. The folder slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. The pages scattered like ashes. Something inside me burned. They weren't just uninviting me from a party, they were erasing me from the story entirely. You're not invited to your dad's birthday this year. The words sat in the air between us, too sharp to be ignored, too calm to make sense. My mother didn't flinch. She just stood there, arms crossed like a school principal handing down punishment, her lips barely curved in something that might have once been a smile. But this wasn't a joke, not even close. Behind her, Tyler shifted in his seat, eyes locked on the carpet like it might swallow him whole. Rebecca wouldn't meet my gaze either. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, indifferent to the bomb that had just detonated in the middle of the room. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. What are you talking about? You've made things complicated, she said, as if that explained anything. We think it's better if you sit this one out. We, not I, not even Dad. We. So that's it? I asked, voice shaking. I'm just cut out of his birthday? Tyler finally looked up. It's not like that. Really? I snapped. Because it feels exactly like that. Rebecca opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but Mom shot her a glance that shut her down instantly. I planned that trip for him, I said. 2 years. 2 years of saving, organizing, researching every single detail so he could finally see where his grandfather came from. And you're telling me I'm not even invited to his birthday? Mom's face was stone. You made it all about you. It hit me harder than I thought it would. That's what she really believed, that this was some show, some performance I'd staged for attention. Not a gift, not love, just ego. I laughed. It was small and bitter and didn't sound like me. Did Dad say this? Did he ask you to uninvite me? No one answered. I looked to Tyler. Did he? He hesitated, then gave the worst answer of all. He trusts Mom to handle the planning. So, no, he didn't even know. I felt something inside me crack. Not like glass, not a clean break, like fabric, torn down the middle, messy and frayed. My hands were cold. My heart was pounding. And yet, I stood there still, like if I moved, I'd unravel completely. Okay, I said quietly. Then I guess I'm not welcome. Mom nodded once, like a manager finalizing a meeting. I turned and walked out before they could see me cry. I used to wait for him on the porch every night, sitting on the top step, knees tucked under my chin, watching the street lights flicker on one by one while the sky shifted from gold to indigo. I'd listen for the low hum of his old Toyota, for the way the tires crunched over the gravel just before he pulled into the driveway. He always noticed me. Even when I pretended to be distracted, he'd ruffle my hair and say, "Hey, Bug, you keeping watch for me?" And I always was. My dad was the one person who made me feel seen, heard, like I mattered in a house that often felt too polished, too cold. My mother loved perfection. Crisp linens, straight A's, neatly packaged emotions. My brother Tyler fit into that world like a puzzle piece. I never did. But my dad, he met me where I was. When I cried after failing a math quiz in 5th grade, he took me out for milkshakes instead of asking why I didn't study harder. When I quit soccer because the girls made fun of me, he didn't push me back onto the field. He taught me chess, told me stories about strong, stubborn women from history, made me believe I could be one of them. There's this photo I keep in my apartment. Me, maybe 8 years old, in oversized sunglasses and a plastic tiara, standing on a folding chair while Dad holds a mixing bowl. We're baking cupcakes for my pretend bakery. I named it Hayley's Royal Treats. My mother's expression when she saw the mess in the kitchen was a mixture of horror and restraint. But my dad? He had frosting on his nose and a smile that crinkled all the way up to his eyes. I didn't realize until much later how alone I was in that house. The small things I brushed off as normal. Being left out of mother-daughter brunches, my birthday presents being afterthoughts, the way my achievements were always followed by, well, Tyler did it first. It was like she was holding a measuring stick I was never meant to meet. But with Dad, it wasn't about measuring up. It was about being, just being his daughter. That was enough for him. And for me, that was everything. So when I imagined his 60th birthday, I didn't think about banners or guest lists. I thought about legacy, about Tuscany and vineyards and the olive groves he always spoke about in that wistful, half-joking way, like it was a dream he didn't dare believe could happen. I wanted to give him that. I wanted to give him the story he never got to finish. Now I'm being told I don't belong at his party. I keep going back to that night on the porch when he looked down at me and said, "You're my favorite hello and my hardest goodbye." I don't think he remembers saying it, but I do. It started with a throwaway comment over dinner. Dad had just poured himself a second glass of red wine and was telling a story about his grandfather, how he came to America from a village in Tuscany with nothing but a satchel, a few lira, and a stubborn heart. "One day," he'd said, swirling the wine in his glass, "I'd love to walk the streets he left behind, just once." He smiled when he said it, like it wasn't meant to be taken seriously. like dreams were just bedtime stories for adults. But I took it seriously. I tucked the moment away and let it grow in the quiet parts of my mind. 2 weeks later, I opened a new savings account. At first, it was small, a couple hundred a month, quietly funneled from my paychecks. No one knew, not even Jennifer, my best friend. It felt too sacred to share, like saying it out loud would pop the balloon before it could leave the ground. I labeled the account Tuscan Sun, partly as a joke, partly as a promise. The idea turned into a plan, and the plan became a mission. I started clipping every unnecessary expense out of my life: takeout, overpriced shoes, impulse weekends. Each dollar I didn't spend on myself was a step closer to something bigger, something that wasn't just a vacation. It was a thank you for the notes he used to sneak into my lunchbox, for the softball games he never missed, for the way he always saw me, even when it felt like no one else did. I researched obsessively. Late nights at my kitchen table, surrounded by travel books, spreadsheets, and old family records I'd managed to dig up online. I learned the name of the village, Castellina in Chianti. I found a restored villa with 6 bedrooms, a view of the vineyards, and a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a cooking show. I even called the owners, practicing my terrible Italian. Apologizing with laughter, they returned kindly. Every detail had purpose: a pasta making class, a day trip to Florence, an olive oil tasting, a visit to the local records office to find our family's name etched in dusty ledgers. I imagined Dad's face when he saw it all: the place his grandfather left, the roots he never got to touch. By the end of the second year, I'd saved $56,300, enough to cover the entire trip for the whole family. Flights, lodging, meals, everything. I didn't want anyone to worry about the cost. I wanted no excuses. It was going to be perfect. A surprise revealed at just the right moment. A chapter in our family's story that would belong to him. That was the dream. And I never saw it coming, that they'd try to erase me from it. It was one of those rare evenings where everything felt almost normal. The 5 of us sat around the old oak dining table: me, Dad, Mom, Tyler, and Rebecca. The same table we'd gathered around every Christmas, every awkward birthday dinner, every just because Sunday. My mother orchestrated like a symphony. The roast chicken was perfectly carved, the wine flowed, and for once, no one was staring down at their phones or checking work emails. It felt, for a moment, like a family. I'd planned my moment carefully. "Okay," I said lightly, placing my wine glass down with a quiet clink. "So I have a little something I want to share." Dad looked up first. He always did. His eyes still had that boyish curiosity when he gave someone his full attention. "What's up, sweetheart?" I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the folder, the one with the glossy photos of vineyards, the sample itinerary, the folded map of Tuscany marked with our family's village. I slid it across the table to him like I was handing over something sacred. "I've been saving," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "for the past 2 years. And I want to take us all to Italy for your 60th. For a second, no one said anything. Then Dad flipped open the folder. The photos spilled out: pictures of the villa, a cooking class in Florence, a sun-drenched courtyard with grapevines twisting overhead. He let out this soft, stunned laugh, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "You did all this?" he asked, his voice low. "Every detail," I said. "You've always wanted to go. I just thought we could go together, as a family." His eyes were wet. He tried to hide it with a grin, but I saw it. "You'd really do that for me?" "Of course," I said, the words catching in my throat. "You deserve this." Tyler reached for one of the brochures, nodding. "Looks amazing," he said. "Wow, that view." Rebecca leaned closer. tracing the edge of the villa photo with her perfectly manicured nail. I've always wanted to see Tuscany. The wine, the food. This looks unreal. Even Mom, who had barely spoken, finally picked up the itinerary. 10 days is a long time, she said, but not dismissively, more like she was doing mental math. You've planned every day? Just suggestions, I said quickly. It's flexible. I want it to feel special, relaxed. Dad looked at me like I'd hung the moon. Best birthday gift I've ever gotten, and we haven't even left the table. Laughter rippled through the room. Glasses clinked. For a moment, it felt like I'd done it, like I'd built something beautiful out of love, and they were all stepping into it with me. But looking back, I should have seen it. Mom's eyes never really softened. Tyler's smile didn't quite reach, and Rebecca kept glancing at Mom for cues before she reacted. They were all nodding, but they weren't really saying yes. After that dinner, I kept waiting for the follow-up texts. The ones where Mom would ask about the villa details, or Tyler would send me a link to a vineyard he'd found, or maybe even Rebecca would message just to say how excited she was. I imagined our group chat coming to life with hotel options and questions about gelato flavors, but the silence was louder than any conversation. Mom didn't mention the trip at all. Not once. Not in her usual Thursday check-in call. Not in the recipe she forwarded me with no subject line. Not even when I sent a photo of a hand-painted ceramic plate I'd found from Montepulciano with a message. Would look great in your kitchen, right? She replied 3 days later with, cute. A bit bright, though. I tried brushing it off. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe she was planning a surprise of her own. Maybe, and I knew how pathetic it sounded even as I thought it, maybe she was just being Mom. Tyler started dodging my calls. When I finally got him on the phone, he said things like, whatever you think works, or yeah, sure, with a tone so flat it sounded like he was reading from a teleprompter. I brought up flight dates, and he said, we'll figure it out later. I mentioned car rentals, and he changed the subject to some new partner at his firm. I tried one more time, asking if he and Rebecca had any preferences for room arrangements, and he said, I'm sure you've already figured that out. That one stung more than I let on. I could feel the undercurrent shifting, the way people who'd once clapped for you start clapping a little softer, like applause turning into obligation. And then there were the little things. Mom scheduling her book club on the same day I planned to come over and show Dad the custom itinerary. Tyler forgetting to RSVP to the passport renewal appointment I'd set up for everyone. Rebecca casually mentioning in passing that 10 days might be a bit much with her work schedule. It was death by 1,000 deflections. Dad stayed excited. That was my anchor. He started practicing Italian badly and sent me screenshots of words he'd mastered, like ciao and vino. His joy was genuine, unfiltered. But theirs wasn't. The worst part wasn't the words they did say. It was the way they smiled when they said them. The two wide grins, the polite nods, the quiet approval with just enough distance to make it feel fake. I knew those smiles. I'd grown up with them. Smiles that didn't welcome. Smiles that didn't believe. Smiles that didn't reach the eyes. It started slowly, so slowly I almost missed it. At first, it was just a few missed texts. I'd send updates, flight options, a gorgeous cooking class in Florence, a link to a boutique vineyard that only took private groups, and no one would respond. Or if they did, it was hours, sometimes days later. Always vague, always neutral. Looks good, Tyler would say. I'm sure whatever you pick will be great, Rebecca would add. I told myself they were just busy. People had lives. I tried not to take it personally. Then Mom forgot I was coming over. I'd told her, twice, that I was swinging by Sunday afternoon to go over the villa contracts. I walked in, arms full of folders and wine samples, only to find her living room filled with half the bridge club and a tray of cucumber sandwiches already sweating on the table. "Oh," she said, not even pretending to look surprised. "I didn't realize that was today." She didn't even ask me to stay. So I left. I stood in my car for 5 minutes gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to this version of reality. I didn't cry, not then. I just drove home in silence. After that, it became routine. I'd make plans to talk through ideas, and suddenly someone would be unavailable. Mom's not feeling well. Tyler's got court prep. Rebecca's working late. We never rescheduled. They never brought it up again. I tried to get ahead of it. I sent emails, group texts. I built a shared Google Drive folder labeled Italy 2024 Dad's Birthday, complete with color-coded itineraries, travel checklists, menus, even photos of the villa's private terrace. No one opened a single document. Weeks went by. I felt like I was shouting into a vacuum. The trip, the dream I had poured myself into, had somehow turned into something they didn't want to touch. And no one would tell me why. Every time I asked, I got the same distant replies, the same silences. And I kept thinking, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I was being too pushy, too detailed. Maybe I cared too much. But then I'd talk to Dad, and he'd light up about the vineyard tour or butcher the name of the town for the 10th time and laugh at himself. He cared. He wanted it. They didn't. Or maybe they just didn't want me leading it. There's a kind of silence that feels accidental. Then there's the kind that feels curated, maintained, like someone's working behind the scenes to make sure you're not included. It was the second kind, and somewhere along the line, without a word or confrontation, a wall had gone up between me and the rest of them, invisible but unmistakably there. I stopped counting how many messages I sent. Group texts, emails, voice notes, all of them carefully worded, never pushy, always upbeat. I made suggestions, not decisions. I included links, prices, even backup plans. I ended every message with a question, something they could easily reply to. But most of them went unanswered. When Tyler did respond, it was always hours later and with the enthusiasm of a dead fish. Sounds fine. Up to you. Whatever works. Nothing that showed he'd even opened the links I sent. When I asked about his and Rebecca's dietary restrictions for the cooking class, he texted back, "We'll figure it out when we get there." But I already knew they weren't coming. Not really. Rebecca was slightly more polite, but just as distant. She replied once to say, "I'm sure whatever you're planning will be lovely," and then never engaged again. I sent her photos of the villa's wine cellar, a list of local spas in case she wanted to relax, even a schedule that included a free day just for wandering. Nothing, not a single thank you, not even a thumbs up. And Mom? She never replied. At all? I called once just to talk, to hear her voice. She picked up and spent the entire conversation asking if I'd remembered to renew my parking permit in Chicago. When I brought up the trip, she changed the subject, said she was tired, said she had a headache, said we'd talk about it another time. That time never came. It was like I was planning a celebration for a ghost family, one that didn't argue, didn't question, didn't care. And maybe that would have hurt less than what was really happening. They were avoiding me on purpose. I started to feel foolish. Every time I opened the trip spreadsheet to make an update, I wondered who I was doing it for. Was I the only one who still believed this was happening? Was I just dragging along a dream no one wanted to share? I'd always thought silence meant disinterest. But this silence? It felt like punishment, like I was being taught a lesson without anyone bothering to say what the rules were. I thought if I just kept showing up, kept being cheerful, kept inviting them in, they'd eventually meet me halfway. But all I got was the sound of my own voice echoing back at me, ignored, unanswered, unwanted, And the worst part? I was starting to believe I deserved it. Dad was the only one who asked questions, the only one who called just to say, "Tell me more." He wanted to know the name of the village again. Castellina, I reminded him, and whether the villa had that view I'd shown him from the brochure. He started keeping a little notepad in the kitchen, scribbling down Italian phrases he'd looked up online. One day he called just to practice saying buongiorno, which he butchered spectacularly, then laughed until he coughed. He was excited, genuinely, deeply excited, and that should have been enough. It should have drowned out the emptiness coming from everyone else. But it didn't. Every time I tried to share updates in the family group chat, I'd see that only one person had read the message: Dad. No one else responded. No one commented on the final itinerary I uploaded or the vineyard tour I managed to book months in advance. When I found an old family photo of great grandpa Antonio in front of the olive trees back in Italy, I sent it to everyone thinking it would spark something. Tyler left it on read. Rebecca didn't even open it. Mom never acknowledged it. Still, Dad kept the dream alive. "I can't believe you've done all this," he said during one of our calls. "I hope I'm not dreaming." He wasn't. I was. And I was starting to wake up. Planning the trip used to make me feel hopeful, like I was doing something bigger than myself. A gift for the man who gave me everything. But now, every reservation I confirmed, every final payment I made, started to feel heavier. Like I was dragging the celebration uphill while everyone else stood at the bottom, arms folded, watching. When I mentioned a group dinner with extended family at a countryside trattoria, Dad got misty-eyed. "My mother used to talk about dishes like that," he said. "She never got to go back. Maybe I'll bring a photo of her." That was the moment I knew I'd made the right choice. For him. And yet, every time I opened the group chat to share something, the silence grew louder. Like I was cheering into a canyon that never echoed back. Like I was clapping for a party no one else wanted to attend. Dad kept dreaming. The rest of them had already checked out. It was his birthday, but somehow I was the only one trying to celebrate it. It wasn't like I meant to listen. I hadn't crept down the hallway or pressed my ear to a closed door. I'd stepped out to the front hallway to take a work call, just a few minutes to confirm a client meeting, and when I came back in through the side entrance, the one that opens near the kitchen, I heard my name. "She's completely taken over his birthday," my mother was saying. Her voice was sharper than usual, low but brittle, like something about to crack. "It's like she thinks she's the only one who knows what Robert wants." I froze just inside the doorway. My fingers still gripped my phone, though the screen had long gone dark. "I know," Tyler sighed. "It's always been like that. Hayley and Dad, off in their own little world. She doesn't even think about how this affects the rest of us." "The rest of us." Mom let out a sharp breath. "She's making it about herself. Booking some elaborate trip none of us asked for. Spending God knows how much money to parade him around Italy like it's a fairy tale. He's turning 60, not 16. He doesn't need a grand adventure. He needs a celebration with people who matter." There was a pause, the kind that feels too quiet to interrupt. Then Tyler again, quieter this time. "We need to do something before she finalizes everything. He deserves a proper celebration, something local, familiar." My throat went dry. I stood there completely still, the words repeating in my head like static. He deserves a proper celebration, something local, something without me. The hallway lights flickered above me, motion sensing and indifferent. I stepped back before they could see me, slow, careful, like if I made a sound, I'd shatter completely. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't want to. I walked out the front door like a guest leaving someone else's home, and not the one I'd grown up in. The cool air outside hit me like a slap, sharp and sudden. I sat in my car, hands shaking in my lap, wondering what part of me still believed I belonged here. For months, I'd been planning something beautiful for him, for the one man who had ever really made me feel like I mattered. And the people closest to him, the people I thought I was doing it for, had been working behind my back to take it all away. It wasn't about the trip. It was never just about the trip. It was about control, about ownership, about what happens when the wrong person tries to give too much in a family that never learned how to receive it. They weren't just going to cancel the trip. They were going to erase me from it. I waited a few days, not because I needed time to think, I'd been thinking too much, but because I wanted to be calm, rational. If I came in swinging, they'd dismiss me as emotional, dramatic, difficult. So I rehearsed it in my head over and over until the words felt weightless. I picked a quiet Tuesday evening and called Mom, asking if I could stop by, just to talk. She sounded surprised. "Of course, Hayley," she said, voice clipped, professional, like we were scheduling a business meeting, not mending a family. When I arrived, the house was silent except for the ticking wall clock in the dining room. She had tea already made, 2 cups set on the kitchen island, like it was all perfectly timed. Tyler wasn't there. Neither was Dad. That felt intentional. I took the seat across from her and folded my hands, trying not to twist the silver ring I always wore. "I wanted to talk about the trip," I began carefully. "I know things have felt tense, but I'd like to understand why." She raised her teacup. "Tense? I wouldn't say that." "Mom," I said gently, "you've been avoiding the plans. Tyler won't engage, and I overheard what you both said in the kitchen the other day about the trip, about me." Her eyes narrowed just for a second, a flash, then it was gone. "You were eavesdropping?" "I was there," I said, a little louder than I intended. "I wasn't sneaking around. I just heard you, and it hurt." She sighed, setting her cup down without looking at me. "Hayley, this is exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. You take everything so personally. It's exhausting." I blinked. Planning a once-in-a-lifetime trip for Dad is exhausting? That's not what I said. "No, but it's what you meant." She stood then, walked to the sink, and busied herself rinsing a clean mug that didn't need rinsing. "You always assume you know what's best for everyone. You never ask." "I asked you all 6 months ago. You said it was a wonderful idea. Dad lit up like a kid. Everyone seemed on board." "People say things in the moment," she replied coolly. "It doesn't mean they haven't reconsidered." "So now you're reconsidering for everyone?" She turned slowly, drying her hands with a towel, her expression unreadable. "We're thinking about what's best for your father and what's realistic for the rest of us." That word hit like a slap. Realistic, as if my love for him was some childish fantasy, as if their absence was the practical option and my effort the foolish one. I stood up. "He still wants this trip." She didn't argue. She just said, "We'll see." And just like that, the conversation was over. Not resolved, not even acknowledged, just ended. Stone, wall, silence. That's what I walked into, and I knew I wouldn't get through on my own. I wasn't supposed to be there. That's the part that still makes my stomach turn. How casually they assumed I wouldn't come, wouldn't notice, wouldn't matter. I was just dropping off a package for Dad, a book I found about the history of Chianti vineyards, full of photos and stories I knew he'd love. I hadn't planned to go inside. I didn't even ring the bell at first. But as I walked up the driveway, I noticed something strange. Cars, a lot of them. Tyler's Audi, Aunt Susan's minivan, Uncle Patrick's truck, even Cousin Martin, who lived 2 hours away, all parked neatly along the curb like a row of shiny secrets. I stood on the porch for a second, clutching the padded envelope in both hands. There was laughter inside, dishes clinking, voices layered on top of one another, comfortable, familiar. unguarded, the way people sound when they think everyone who matters is already in the room. I rang the bell. The voices quieted. Rebecca opened the door, her face slipping from surprise into something softer, more careful. Hayley, hey, what's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone even, polite. But I already knew. She hesitated. Just a little gathering. A family gathering? Before she could answer, I stepped past her into the house. The dining room was full. Mom stood at the head of the table with a stack of envelopes, thick ones, the kind you use for formal invitations. Aunt Susan was leaning over centerpiece mock-ups. Uncle Patrick was hunched over his iPad, comparing catering quotes. Everyone froze when they saw me, as if I'd walked in wearing a bomb vest. Hayley, Mom said, her voice like glass. We weren't expecting you. Clearly, I replied. I held up the book, then lowered it again. What is this? No one answered right away. Tyler finally cleared his throat. It's just some preliminary planning? For what? The party, Mom said, calm and clipped. Your father's birthday. I looked around the room, at the food spread across the table, the seating chart in progress, the piles of party favors being quietly shoved behind napkin rings. The party, the one I'd been excluded from, the one no one had told me about. When were you going to tell me? I asked. Mom smiled, and it was the cruelest thing she'd ever done. We didn't think you'd be interested, given your other plans. I've been planning his birthday for 2 years, I said, and you're all here behind my back, doing this? Tyler stood. We thought it'd be easier without the drama. I nodded slowly, the heat rising in my chest. Right, so I'm the problem. No one corrected me. I looked at the room, my family, and realized I was the only one who hadn't known the meeting was happening, the only one who hadn't been invited. And for the first time, I wondered if they'd ever really meant to include me at all. Mom closed the kitchen door behind us with that soft, deliberate click I'd come to recognize over the years, the sound of a conversation being controlled. She didn't sit down. She just stood there, arms crossed, gaze level, like this was a negotiation she had already won. I didn't sit either. You went ahead and planned a party, I said, my voice lower than I expected, without even telling me. She didn't flinch. We thought it would be easier. Easier than what? Talking to me like an adult? She gave me a look that might have passed as sympathy to someone who didn't know her. Hayley, this doesn't have to be dramatic. You've been pushing this trip, and not everyone feels comfortable with it. Then say that. Say you don't want to go, don't lie to my face, and then throw a party behind my back. We didn't lie, Tyler said, stepping into the kitchen behind her, voice steady and lawyer slick. We reassessed. That's not lying. You reassessed, I echoed, without me. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, too. Silent. Always silent. I turned back to Mom. So what? You're just erasing me from the celebration? She paused, and that was somehow worse than saying yes outright. We're planning something that works for everyone, and truthfully, Hayley, your involvement hasn't made that easy. My heart thudded in my chest, each beat more distant than the last. So, what are you saying? That I'm not invited? She looked straight at me. Yes, it was a clean cut. No hesitation, no soft edges. Yes, she said again, as if it were a kindness. We've all agreed. You're not welcome at your father's birthday celebration. The room tilted slightly. For a moment, I thought I might actually fall. Not from shock, but from something colder. Recognition. Like I'd always known this was coming. Like I'd spent years tap dancing on the edge of this moment, and now the floor had finally given out. Rebecca looked down at her shoes. Tyler stared at the cabinets. And Mom? Mom looked proud, calm, settled into her decision like it was the most reasonable thing in the world to uninvite your daughter from her own father's milestone birthday. Wow, I said, barely above a whisper. You really meant it. I do, she said. We all do. I nodded once, feeling the burn behind my eyes, but refusing to let it spill. Then I guess you can plan it without me. I walked past them through the hallway lined with smiling family portraits I was no longer part of, out the front door, and into the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from being erased. I didn't cry until I reached the end of the driveway, not even when she said it, not even when Tyler just stood there, arms folded like a human exclamation point, or when Rebecca looked at the floor like she wanted to disappear, not even when my mother, looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't welcome at my father's birthday. But once I got to my car, the tears came fast and hot, blurring the steering wheel, the windshield, the street lights. I sat there, engine off, keys still in my hand, heart pounding like it was trying to run without the rest of me. I had planned everything. I had imagined the moment we'd land in Florence, the way Dad would breathe in the Tuscan air and smile like he was finally home. I'd imagined us walking through the olive groves together, hearing stories about his grandfather, raising glasses of wine over meals that tasted like history. I had imagined a celebration of family, of roots, of love, and now I was the one being cut out of it. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. The sky was getting darker, a bruised sort of blue, and I realized I hadn't moved. I kept replaying the scene in my head like a bad dream I couldn't shake. Mom's voice, calm and cruel. Tyler's silence, as damning as anything he could have said. The way no one fought for me. The worst part wasn't the exclusion, it was the ease of it. They hadn't wrestled with the decision. They hadn't argued. They hadn't even tried to soften it. Just a simple, unanimous rejection. A closed door I hadn't even known was swinging shut until it hit me in the chest. And Dad didn't know. He couldn't. Because if he did, if he really knew, he would have called. He would have stopped it. Wouldn't he? I opened my messages, scrolled through the group chat, still silent, then to my one-on-one thread with Dad. The last message from him was 3 days ago. Practiced my Italian today. Pretty sure I accidentally asked someone to kiss my cow. Can't wait for this trip. I stared at that text until my vision blurred again. He didn't know. They hadn't told him. They were planning a party in his name while feeding him lies and carving me out of the picture. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything soft inside me and left the shell standing, nodding, pretending this was fine. I wasn't angry yet. Anger still required energy, belief. I was something quieter, sadder. I didn't know where I stood with them anymore, or if I ever really had. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the glow of my phone screen painting shadows across the room. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face, her smile sharp as glass, and heard her voice echoing, "You're not welcome," over and over, until it stopped sounding like a sentence and started sounding like a truth. By morning, something inside me had gone still, not numb exactly, just quiet, like a storm had passed and left the landscape bare. No more questions, no more hope, just action. I got up, made coffee I didn't drink, and opened my laptop. The villa was first, a small stone house nestled in the hills of Tuscany, warm and worn and perfect. I had emailed with the owner, Signora Bianchi, so many times I knew her dog's name. My cursor hovered over the cancellation button for a long moment before I clicked it. Then I wrote a message, polite, apologetic, vague. Family circumstances have changed. Thank you for your kindness. I hope one day my father will still get to see your beautiful home. Next were the flights. I canceled all 5. Mine, Dad's, Tyler's, Rebecca's, even Mom's, though I doubt she ever planned to get on that plane. There were fees, penalties, policies that wouldn't bend. I didn't care. Every confirmation email I deleted felt like severing a cord I had wrapped around my heart. The cooking class, the vineyard tour, the translator for the family records office. I unraveled it all, one thread at a time. The last thing I did was move the money. All of it. $56,300, transferred from the account I'd opened 2 years ago, labeled Tuscan Sun, back to my personal savings. I stared at the transaction confirmation like it was a gravestone, not of a trip, but of a dream, of everything it had meant. Because it had never just been about Italy. It had been about showing my father how deeply I loved him, about creating something real, something lasting, something that wasn't just cards and cake and polite conversation. It had been a gift, and now it sat quietly in a bank ledger, returned to me like an unwanted package. I shut the laptop and sat there motionless for a long time. It wasn't the money I mourned, it was the meaning, the 2 years of saving, the nights spent researching, the giddy excitement I felt when I found the perfect wine tasting tucked away in a village no one had ever heard of. All of it reduced to nothing. I thought I'd feel angry, but all I felt was grief. And grief, I was learning, doesn't always cry. Sometimes it just hits cancel. The first day, I told myself they just needed time, that maybe Mom regretted what she'd said, that Tyler would reach out, try to smooth things over with one of his lawyerly half apologies, that Rebecca might send a message, even something vague like, "Hope you're okay." But the hours passed, then the day, then the weekend, and no one said a word. The silence settled around me like dust, thick, weightless, everywhere. I kept checking my phone, the way you do after a breakup, hoping for a text you know isn't coming. The group chat was still and empty, not even a passive-aggressive meme or a dry one-liner from Tyler. I sent nothing. Neither did they. The Italy folder on my desktop stared back at me like a wound. I waited for my dad. If anyone would call, it would be him. If anyone would say, "This isn't right," it would be him. Every time my phone lit up, I hoped it was his name. Every vibration made my stomach tighten. But it was never him. Just junk emails and bank alerts and a text from Jennifer asking if I wanted to come over and drink wine on her fire escape. It didn't make sense. He had to know by now. The party planning, the exclusion, the cancellations. How could he not? And still, nothing. I told myself maybe Mom hadn't told him. Maybe she was spinning her version of events, dressing up betrayal as practicality. Maybe she was saying I didn't want to come, that I was the one who pulled away. Maybe he believed her. That thought hurt more than anything. I didn't realize how much I'd been holding on to the belief that he would be different, that he would see through the noise, that even if everyone else was fine pretending I didn't exist, my dad would feel the absence of me. But the days kept passing, and the phone stayed silent. I stopped checking it after a while, stopped expecting anything. I moved the trip folder into an archive, turned off notifications for the group chat, set my phone to Do Not Disturb. It was easier to pretend it wasn't happening when I couldn't see it unfold in real time. But at night, lying in bed with the ceiling fan humming above me, I'd feel it, the silence, not just from them, from him. And it wasn't passive anymore. It wasn't just absence. It was a choice. They had all made a choice, and somehow it felt like I was the only one still bleeding from it. The doorbell rang at 9:42 p.m. I was still in pajamas, hair in a messy bun, surrounded by takeout containers, and silence. The TV was on, but muted, playing some cooking show I hadn't been watching. I didn't move right away. No one had rung my bell in days. Weeks, maybe. I hadn't ordered anything. I hadn't invited anyone. When I finally opened the door, Jennifer was standing there with a paper bag in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. I brought reinforcements, she said. I blinked. What kind? Chocolate, alcohol, and righteous indignation, she said, pushing past me into the apartment. And don't even try to pretend you're fine. I closed the door behind her slowly. How did you? You texted me 3 words. It's not happening. You think I wasn't going to show up after that? She dropped the bag on the counter and started unpacking. Red wine, a pint of salted caramel ice cream, 2 chocolate bars, and a tiny notebook that said "Burn Book" on the cover. I don't even know what to say, I admitted. My voice cracked in the middle. Then don't say anything. She handed me the wine bottle. Drink. We sat on the couch, curled into opposite ends like we had since college. Legs tucked, the city glowing just beyond the windows. I told her everything. The planning, the silence, the confrontation, the sentence, "You're not welcome," the cancellations, the silence from Dad. My voice wavered, but I got through it. When I was done, Jennifer didn't jump to fill the quiet. She let it sit for a second, then reached over and squeezed my hand. That's messed up, she said finally. Like, truly messed up. Your mom? I always knew she was controlling. But this? I just don't know what to do now, I said. I feel like I lost something I can't get back. You did, she said, but maybe not the part you think. I stared at her. Maybe this isn't about them anymore, she said. Maybe it's about you. You planned this beautiful, thoughtful, once-in-a-lifetime trip. You saved for years. You did everything right, and they made you feel like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was a gift, and just because they didn't accept it doesn't mean you have to throw it away. You want me to go alone? I want you to go for you, she said. You don't need their permission to live your life. Let it be yours now. Take the trip. Rewrite the story. The idea hit me like cold water, jarring, sharp, and strangely refreshing. Wouldn't that be selfish? I whispered. No, she said, leaning in. It would be freeing. And for the first time in weeks, something inside me stirred. Not rage, not grief. Possibility. The next morning, my apartment was still wrapped in that strange post-storm stillness. Empty wine glasses on the coffee table, a half-eaten chocolate bar, Jennifer's hoodie draped over the back of the couch. I stood in the kitchen barefoot, coffee growing cold in my hands, staring at the open laptop on the counter. The booking site was already pulled up. Tabs everywhere, flights, boutique hotels, a map of Tuscany marked with places I'd memorized like scripture over the last 2 years. All of it waiting. I sat down and hovered over the keyboard. Rebooking the trip without Dad felt like betrayal, but not going at all, that felt like a betrayal of everything I'd worked for, of myself, of the girl who had believed in this dream enough to build it from scratch. So I started small. A new flight, just one ticket, Chicago to Rome. No return yet. I'd figure that out later. I picked an early departure, direct, with a window seat so I could watch the world unfold beneath me. Then the lodging. The family villa was too big, too heavy with expectations. I found a restored stone cottage in Umbria with a single bedroom, ivy crawling up its walls, and a small patio overlooking an olive grove. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Next, I rebuilt the itinerary, not around others, not around impressing or including or balancing anyone's preferences, just me. A market tour in Florence, a pasta-making class that didn't require a group, a day trip to Siena where I could wander the cobbled streets alone and not explain myself to anyone. I skipped the wine tastings for now. Maybe I'd go, maybe I wouldn't. There were no shared calendars this time, no group chats, no passive-aggressive silence, only confirmations that landed in my inbox like small, steady affirmations. You're going. You're doing this. I booked everything in one sitting. When the final confirmation popped up, I didn't feel the adrenaline rush I expected. No heart pounding, no cinematic swell of music in my mind, just a quiet, grounded sense of peace. I was going to Italy alone, not as an escape, not as revenge, but as a declaration. I mattered. I closed the laptop, sat back, and let the stillness fill the space. There was grief in it, yes, but there was also power. I had spent years trying to prove I belonged, trying to earn a seat at a table that was already set without me. Now, I was building my own table and it had room for one. It was 3:17 a.m. when my phone lit up. I didn't hear it ring. I'd put it on Do Not Disturb hours earlier. But the screen glowed from the nightstand, and something made me turn over and check it. One missed call, one voicemail. Tyler. For a second, I thought it had to be a mistake. He never called me late. He barely called me at all. I stared at the notification like it might explain itself, like maybe there was another Tyler in my phone. There wasn't. I pressed play. His voice was low, almost hoarse. He sounded tired. No, not tired. Wrecked. Hayley, it's me. Look, I don't know if you'll even listen to this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. He exhaled shakily, and I could hear movement in the background. Maybe he was pacing, maybe sitting in his car. I messed up, he said. We all did, but especially me. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, like he didn't know how to say what came next. Mom lied to us, to Dad. She told him you backed out of the birthday, that you refused to come, that you didn't want anything to do with the celebration. My stomach dropped. She intercepted your emails, deleted texts, made it look like you just disappeared. And we believed her. I believed her. His voice cracked on that last part, a soft, strangled sound I'd never heard from him before. Dad found one of your brochures tonight, hidden in Mom's drawer, the one with the vineyard photos and that ridiculous map you annotated by hand. He asked her about it, and the story fell apart. She tried to explain, but she couldn't. She couldn't keep up with her own lies. There was a long pause. I didn't breathe through most of it. Hayley, he's devastated. He thought you just stopped caring, that you were too busy, that maybe you didn't love him the way he thought you did. And I let him believe that. I didn't ask questions. I didn't check. I didn't trust you. Another breath, a broken one. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this, but you deserve the truth. Dad deserves the truth. Please, call me back. He needs to hear from you. I need to hear from you. The message ended there. No goodbye, just the silence of too many words unsaid. I sat up in bed, heart racing. The darkness around me suddenly alive with possibility and rage, and something I hadn't felt in weeks, clarity. He hadn't known. Dad hadn't known, and everything I thought was lost might still be waiting, just buried under someone else's lies. ChatGPT's I called him the moment the sun came up. My hands shook as I held the phone to my ear, heart pounding in a way that made my throat feel tight. Tyler answered on the first ring. His voice was raw, like he hadn't slept. Hayley, he said, just my name, no preamble, no excuses. I listened to your voicemail, I said quietly. He let out a breath that sounded like it had been sitting in his chest for years. I'm so sorry. Is he okay? I asked. Dad? Tyler hesitated. Not really. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The lump in my throat was too big, too full of all the things I hadn't said out loud. How much it hurt, how much I had missed him, how scared I'd been that he believed I didn't care. I swear to you, Tyler said, voice trembling. He didn't know. She never told him about the trip. She told us all that you'd backed out, that you didn't want to be involved. She made it sound like you were being selfish. The word landed hard because that's what they had called me. Controlling, Dramatic. Difficult? She told Dad you didn't even want to come to the birthday, Tyler continued. He's been trying not to take it personally, but it's been killing him. He thought you were pulling away, that maybe the distance wasn't just physical. I blinked hard, but the tears still came. So he thought I just stopped caring? Yeah, Tyler said softly, and I believed her. I didn't even question it. I didn't think she'd lie like that. Not like this. Why would she do it? Tyler was silent for a long moment. Then, I think she's always been jealous of you, of your connection with him, of the fact that he lights up when you walk into a room in a way he never did with her. I didn't want that to be true, but deep down, I'd always known it was. It had lived in the spaces between her smiles and her silences, in the way she'd praise Tyler and withhold from me. I'd felt it my whole life, but this was something else. This was sabotage. I need to see him, I said. I figured you would, Tyler replied. He's at Uncle Patrick's. He couldn't stay at the house last night, not after everything came out. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Text me the address. I will. And Hayley? What? I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm going to do everything I can to make this right. I didn't say I forgave him. I didn't say I was ready. I just said, good, and hung up the phone. Because now I had one thing on my mind, Dad, and the truth he deserved to hear, this time from me. I stared at my phone for a long time before I pressed call. Dad's contact was still saved under Papa, a joke from when I was 12 and convinced he could fix anything. Bikes, broken cabinets, even broken hearts. I almost changed it a few times in the last few weeks, almost deleted it more than once, but I never could. The phone rang once, twice, then his voice quiet and uncertain. Hello? I froze for a breath. It's me, I said. It's Hayley. Silence. Then a sound, soft and sharp at the same time, like he'd been holding something in for too long. Hayley, he said, and I heard it. The weight, the ache, the disbelief. Dad? I whispered. He didn't speak right away. I could hear his breathing on the line, uneven. Then, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. I believe you, I said, and I did. Completely. Deep in my chest, I had always believed that if he had known, he would have stopped it. I thought you were gone, he said. I thought you were done with us. With me. No, I said, my voice catching. I planned that whole trip for you. I booked everything. I was so excited. I thought we'd walk the streets of that village, just you and me, tracing our family's footsteps. He was crying now, and he wasn't hiding it. She told me you didn't care, that you backed out, that it wasn't important to you anymore. I closed my eyes, let the tears roll down my own face now. It was the most important thing. I kept hoping you'd call, he said. But then when you didn't, I started to believe maybe I'd done something wrong. No, I said fiercely. You didn't do anything wrong. You are the only reason I even made it through all of this. I'm so sorry, he whispered. No, I'm sorry, I said, that you didn't get to see the plans, that you didn't know what I had built for you, that you were lied to. There was a pause. Do you still have it? He asked carefully. The trip? Yeah. I swallowed hard. I canceled everything. Oh. But I rebooked it for myself, a smaller version, a solo version. Another silence. Then, in the gentlest voice, he said, It doesn't have to stay solo. I smiled through the tears. Would you come with me? In a heartbeat, he said. And in that moment, everything shifted, not fixed, not erased, but cracked open, just wide enough for hope to step through. We met at the lake, not by plan, by instinct. It was the same quiet little spot we used to walk to when I was a teenager, whenever things got tense at home. He'd bring a thermos of coffee, and I'd bring my silence, and we'd sit on the old bench under the weeping willow, watching the ripples move like secrets across the surface of the water. It was our place, untouched by anyone else's rules. He was already there when I arrived. Same jacket, same thermos. Older now, a little more tired around the eyes, but still him, still my dad. I didn't rush to him. I just walked slow, my heart thudding in my chest, like it couldn't believe this was real, that after weeks of silence, of being shut out, we were here. He stood when he saw me, and then he opened his arms. I walked into them without a word. His hug was everything I remembered, safe, warm, grounding. I pressed my face into his shoulder and let the tears come, not loud, just steady. He held me like he knew exactly what it had cost me to get here. "I thought I lost you," he said into my hair. "I thought you believed her," I whispered. "I didn't want to," he said. "But when you didn't call, when no one corrected her." "I thought I wasn't wanted," I said. "I thought you picked them." He pulled back, looked me straight in the eye. "I would never pick anyone over you. Ever." I sat beside him on the bench, wiping my cheeks with the sleeve of my sweater. The lake shimmered in front of us, calm and quiet, like it had waited too. "I planned everything," I said softly. "Florence, Sienna, the villa, even a pasta-making class I thought you'd hate but secretly love." He chuckled, the sound still rough with emotion. "You know me too well." "And she took it," I said. "She took it all from you. From us." He nodded slowly. "She wanted control. She always has. But I never thought she'd lie like that. She lied to you. She lied to Tyler. She lied to me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm done pretending it didn't happen. I'm not going back to that house. Not yet." "Do you still want to go?" I asked, not sure I could bear the answer. "To Italy?" I nodded. He reached over and took my hand. "Yes, but only with you." The wind stirred the trees above us. A few leaves fell into the water, breaking the reflection, but the ripples calmed quickly. We sat there as the sun dipped lower, not needing to fill the silence. We were together, and that was enough for now. We met at Tyler's place the next night. Neutral ground, safer than Dad's, quieter than mine. The air was thick with everything unsaid. Even the furniture felt tense, like it wasn't sure whose side it was on. Tyler opened the door, eyes puffy, hair unkempt. He looked like he hadn't slept since the voicemail. I didn't hug him. I just walked in. Dad was already seated at the kitchen island, his hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. When he saw me, his face softened and he gave the smallest nod. I nodded back. That was enough. Tyler poured coffee like it might make him braver. "I talked to her," he said. Dad's jaw clenched. "And?" "She's still trying to spin it. Said it was a misunderstanding. Said you," he looked at me, "weren't clear in your intentions. That maybe you'd backed out on your own." I almost laughed. "Of course she did. But I told her I knew the truth," Tyler added. "I told her I found the emails she deleted, the messages she hid. She didn't deny it. Not really." Dad let out a slow breath. She's never been good at admitting when she's wrong. But this was a step too far. There was silence for a moment, heavy but shared. Then Tyler looked at both of us. "So what now?" "We confront her," I said. Dad nodded slowly. "Together." Tyler's eyes darted to mine. "Are you sure you want that?" "No," I said honestly, "but it has to happen, not for her, for us." It wasn't about making her understand. She probably never would. It was about reclaiming the truth, about refusing to let her rewrite the story in her own image again, about standing in front of her not as broken pieces, but as a united front, one she couldn't twist or divide. She needs to see what she did to this family. Dad said, and she needs to see it from all of us. Tyler nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. I still don't know how I missed it. Because she's good at making people feel like questioning her is betrayal, I said. But it's not. The real betrayal was letting her divide us. For the first time in years, the three of us, me, my brother, and our father, stood on the same side of the line. We had been fractured for so long, I'd forgotten what unity felt like. But now we were aligned, not because it was easy, but because it was right. And this time, when we faced her, we wouldn't do it alone. We didn't knock. Dad used his key, just like always, but this time he didn't pause at the door or call out a polite, "Hello?" He stepped in with purpose, and Tyler and I followed close behind. The house smelled the same: rosemary, polished wood, the faint trace of vanilla from a candle Mom always lit. But something about it felt hollow now, or maybe I just saw it more clearly. She was in the dining room arranging napkins. Of course she was. She looked up, startled, when she saw all three of us. Her hands froze mid-fold. Oh, I wasn't expecting visitors. Dad didn't waste time. We need to talk. Her eyes flicked to Tyler, then to me. She gave a tight smile. This isn't necessary. We've all had time to cool down. This is necessary, I said, stepping forward, because you lied. She raised an eyebrow, already slipping into her default tone, controlled, dismissive. Don't be dramatic. She found the emails. Tyler cut in, the ones you deleted. I checked the account. You erased her messages. You made it look like she walked away. Something in her expression shifted, only slightly. A blink, a breath. But I saw it. And you, Dad said, voice lower now, steadier. You told me my daughter didn't care, that she abandoned the trip, that she didn't want to be part of my birthday at all. Mom straightened her spine. I was protecting you. The whole thing was impractical, expensive. It would have been a disaster. I thought it was better to lie, I snapped, to plan a party behind my back, to erase me from my own father's celebration. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no script. Tyler shook his head. You didn't protect anyone. You just wanted control, and you didn't care who you had to hurt to get it. You divided us, I added, and for a while, you got away with it. But not anymore. Dad stepped closer. I know the truth now, all of it, and I won't pretend this didn't happen. I won't look the other way just because it's easier. Mom looked at him, and for the first time, I saw something unfamiliar in her face. Not anger, not defiance. Fear. You're all turning on me, she said quietly. No, Dad said. You turned your back on us. We're just done pretending you didn't. The room went still. No one moved. No one spoke. The quiet wasn't peace. It was finality. And then I turned and walked out. Tyler followed. Dad stayed a moment longer, then joined us. We didn't slam the door. We didn't shout. But something closed behind us just the same. And this time, it wasn't us who was shut out. ChatGPT's I didn't expect her to call. It was 3 days after the confrontation. I was packing for Italy again when her name lit up my phone. For a moment, I just stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I answered, not because I wanted closure, not because I wanted to forgive her, but because some part of me still needed to hear why. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No edge, no frost, just small. Hayley, she said, thank you for picking up. I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping the phone tightly. What do you want? I want you to understand, she said, not to excuse me, just to know. I didn't say anything. I let the silence answer for me. I was 24 when I met your father, she said. I just left home. I didn't know who I was, not really. And he, He knew exactly who he was. He walked into a room like he belonged there, like the world had a place just for him. I loved that about him, and I hated it. She paused. I heard her swallow. Then you were born, and he looked at you like you were the sun, like everything else was just scenery. And I tried to be okay with that. But the truth is, I was jealous of my own daughter. My breath caught in my throat. I'd never admit that out loud, not to anyone, not even to myself for a long time. But it's true. He lit up when you entered the room. He laughed more. He softened. And I felt like the shadow in the corner, like I'd been replaced by someone who didn't even know she was doing it. I didn't, I whispered. I know, she said. That's what made it worse. There was a long silence, the kind you don't rush. I thought if I could control your distance, she continued, if I could shape the story before you did, I could protect myself, keep him from drifting further, keep all of you in reach. I thought if I made you the outsider, I could stop feeling like one. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, but clarity. You broke something, I said, and I don't know if it can be fixed. I know, she said, but I needed you to know it wasn't about the trip. It was never about the trip. I know that now, I said, and I did. The silence after that wasn't cold, just tired, worn out from years of pretending. I hope someday you can forgive me, she said softly. Maybe, I replied, but not yet. Then I hung up, not out of cruelty, but because this time I needed the last word. Dad didn't pack much, just a single suitcase, his old shaving kit, and the hardcover book I gave him last Christmas, The Art of Stillness. I stood by the car as he loaded it, watching his movements, slow, careful, like he was trying to leave without breaking more than necessary. He wasn't angry. That was the hardest part. Not yelling, not slamming doors, just quiet. He'd called me that morning, said he was leaving the house for a while, said he needed space to think, to breathe. I offered to help him find a place, but he already had one, an apartment above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon in early mornings. I didn't ask if Mom knew. He closed the trunk and turned to me. I don't know what happens next, he said, but I can't stay in that house. Not with what's come to light. I nodded. You don't owe anyone normalcy. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, not just physically, but emotionally worn, like someone who'd been holding up a structure for too long, only to realize it was never his to carry. I loved her, he said. I still do, in some complicated, tangled up way, but love doesn't excuse what she did. No, I said, it doesn't. He rubbed his forehead. And Tyler, he's trying, but I think he's scared of what facing all this really means. He'll get there, I said, but not if we keep pretending everything's fine. Dad looked at me then, really looked, and there was a flash of something I hadn't seen in weeks. Pride, maybe even relief. You were always the one who told the truth, even when it cost you. It's costing all of us now. Yeah, he said quietly. But at least now we know what's real. The family felt like a mosaic now. Shattered, yes, but the kind that could maybe be reassembled into something honest. Not whole, not the way it used to be, but something new, something real. Mom stayed in the house. She hadn't reached out again. Not to me, not to Dad. Tyler told me she'd retreated into silence, moving through rooms like a ghost. I didn't pity her, but I didn't hate her either. Not anymore. What she did was cruel, but it came from a wound I could finally see, even if I didn't want to carry it for her. Tyler and I weren't close, not yet, but we texted more now. Short things, honest things, and that in itself was a start. When Dad got in the car and pulled away, I didn't cry. I didn't wave. I just stood there, watching as the man who had always made everyone else feel at home finally chose to build one of his own. For himself, and maybe in time, for the rest of us too. The day before our flight, I stood at the window watching the rain blur the skyline. My suitcase was already packed. Two simple bags, no color-coded folders, no itinerary printouts for 5 people, no backup plans. Just the basics, clothes, passport, and a copy of the original trip binder I couldn't bring myself to throw away. I thought I'd feel sadder, but mostly I felt still. The noise had finally quieted. Dad arrived just after noon. He knocked softly, even though he didn't have to. When I opened the door, he was holding 2 cappuccinos and a grin that reminded me of birthday mornings when I was little. Nervous, hopeful, trying. "Still good for tomorrow?" he asked. I stepped aside, let him in. "Still good?" He set the drinks down and looked around my apartment like he was seeing it for the first time, not just the space, but me inside it. "You sure?" he asked. "You don't have to go through with it if it feels like too much." "It is too much," I said, "but it's the right kind of too much." He smiled, and something in his shoulders relaxed. "I've never been to Europe," he said after a pause. "Your mom always said it was too far, too expensive, too impractical." I laughed, just once, soft. She always hated anything that wasn't under her control. "Yeah," he said, "but this feels like ours." And it did. This wasn't the same trip I'd spent years building. It wasn't about pleasing everyone or crafting the perfect moment. There would be no group photos in front of ancient cathedrals, no tightly planned family dinners with too many moving parts. It would just be the two of us. Gelato when we wanted, wine when we didn't need a reason, walks through towns we couldn't pronounce, and silence, comfortable, open silence, the kind that lets you breathe. "Thank you," he said suddenly, eyes a little glassy, "for not giving up on this, on me." I shook my head. "You're the one thing I never doubted." He nodded slowly, like the truth of that was finally landing where it needed to. We sat on the couch, sipping lukewarm coffee, the rain still tapping at the windows, and I realized something. The trip had changed, yes, but maybe so had I. It wasn't about salvaging what was lost anymore. It was about stepping fully into what remained and choosing to live inside it, not out of obligation, not out of hope that someone else would finally see me, but for myself, for him, for us. Tomorrow we would fly to Italy, not as a broken family, but as something smaller and somehow more whole. I opened the original binder one last time. It was a mess now. Dog-eared pages, sticky notes hanging by threads, flight confirmations scratched out with red pen. In the beginning, it had been my pride, my proof that I could create something beautiful for the people I loved. Now it was something else entirely, a blueprint of what could have been, and a lesson in letting go. I took a deep breath, closed it gently, and slid it into a drawer. Then I opened a fresh notebook. No tabs, no color codes, just a blank page and a ballpoint pen. I wrote at the top, "Italy for us." This time, the plan wasn't about seeing it all. It was about seeing enough. Enough to remember why we came, enough to feel free, enough to feel together. I started with Florence because he'd always talked about it. The Duomo, the Arno River, the way Michelangelo sculpted marble like it was breath and bone. 2 nights in a small inn near the heart of the city, a walking tour we could abandon halfway through, a dinner reservation at a place with no English menu because Dad liked stumbling through languages and I liked watching him try. Next, I circled a quiet town in Umbria, Orvieto, not because it was famous or flashy, but because it sat on a hill and looked like a secret. a little apartment above a cafe with a terrace where we could drink coffee in the morning and wine at dusk. A day to just exist, to read, to talk, or not talk. I planned a visit to the archives after that, a dusty little office in a nearby village where some old clerk could help us search our last name in handwritten records. Dad had always wanted to trace the roots, to know the names behind the stories. Maybe we'd find something, maybe we wouldn't, but the trying would be enough. There would be no vineyard tour this time, no cooking classes, no big finale dinners, just smaller things. Wandering into churches because they're open, ordering two of something because neither of us could decide, a ferry ride to nowhere in particular, sitting in a piazza and watching the world move without needing to chase it. By the end of the afternoon, the page was full, not tight or rigid, just full enough to breathe. I looked at it, this new itinerary, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of what had been lost. I felt the promise of what was left, and it was enough, more than enough. The airport was quieter than I expected. Maybe it was the early hour, or maybe I was just too wrapped in the weight of the moment to notice the usual chaos, rolling suitcases, overhead announcements, kids crying in strollers. It all blurred into background noise, like the world knew this wasn't just a trip. It was something else, something we didn't have a name for yet. Dad stood beside me at the check-in counter, reading over the itinerary one last time, even though he didn't need to. He'd already memorized it. I watched him trace the names of the towns with his finger, mouthing each one softly like he was tasting them. I still can't believe we're really doing this, he said. I smiled, tightening the strap of my carry-on. I can't believe we're doing it this way. He glanced at me, that half smile I knew so well curling at the corner of his mouth. Maybe this was always how it was meant to be. We moved through security, through the terminal, through time. Every step forward felt like shedding something. Old anger, disappointment, the years of misunderstanding that had settled into our family like dust. I kept waiting for a sting of sadness to hit, but it didn't. Not then. All I felt was relief and gratitude that after everything, he was still beside me. We sat at the gate, sipping coffee from paper cups. I rested my head against his shoulder like I used to on long car rides when I was a kid. He didn't speak, he just let me be there. They called her this morning, he said after a while, his voice soft. Your mother. I sat up slowly. What did she say? That she hopes I come to my senses. I let out a short breath. And do you? He looked at me. I think I'm just starting to. The boarding announcement echoed overhead. I stood smoothing the front of my jacket. Dad gathered our things, adjusted his hat, and gave me a nod. We walked to the gate side by side, not speaking, not needing to, the kind of silence that felt full. When we stepped onto the plane, I felt something shift, not dramatically, just a small flicker inside, like a lantern being lit in a dark room. We weren't fleeing anymore. We weren't escaping. We were choosing to move forward, to carry what mattered and leave the rest behind, choosing to reclaim something we thought we'd lost, ourselves, each other, this dream. And as the plane lifted from the ground, I looked out the window and whispered, finally. We were on our way, not just to Italy, but to something whole. The air in the village smelled like olive trees and wood smoke, like history that hadn't been scrubbed clean. It was smaller than I imagined, just a handful of stone buildings clustered on a hilltop, red roofs glowing against the pale blue sky. There were no tourists, no signs in English, just cobblestones worn smooth by generations of footsteps, and the distant sound of church bells echoing like memory. Dad stood beside me in the little piazza, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes wide. I think this is it, he said softly. This is where Nonno was born. We had only a name and a date. A town on a handwritten birth certificate Dad had found in a box in the attic. No guarantees, no plan, just hope and the address of a small records office wedged between a pharmacy and a bakery. We walked through narrow alleys that looked like they hadn't changed in 100 years. People nodded as we passed. A few stared, not unfriendly, just curious, like they could sense we didn't belong, but also, somehow, that we did. The records clerk was a woman in her 70s with silver hair in a tight bun and reading glasses that hung from a string around her neck. She took the paper from us, squinted at it, then looked up with a sharp glint in her eye. "You are the daughter?" she asked in accented English. "I'm the granddaughter," I said. "He's the son." She nodded slowly, then disappeared into a back room. 10 minutes passed, maybe more. Dad and I didn't speak. We just sat side by side on a worn bench, the way we always did when the moment was too big for words. When she returned, she held a folded piece of paper and a small smile. "You have family here," she said. Dad's head snapped up. "Still? Now?" "See," she said. "Cousins. They live just outside the village. I called." She handed him the note with a name and a phone number written in careful block letters. He stared at it like it might dissolve in his hands. "You can go now," she added, gesturing toward the door. "They are expecting you." We drove down a winding road until we reached a farmhouse surrounded by olive trees. A man stood by the gate, gray hair, broad shoulders, weathered hands. He looked at Dad and smiled slowly. "Giorgio?" he asked. Dad stepped forward. "Yes." The man opened his arms. "Cugino." And just like that, the past reached forward and wrapped us in its arms. We stayed for hours. Coffee turned into lunch. Names we didn't know spilled from old photographs. Faces we resembled looked back at us from picture frames. Laughter rose up, soft and stunned, like none of us could believe what we'd found. We didn't come looking for family, but somehow family found us. The table stretched the length of the garden, set under a canopy of grapevines that filtered the sunlight into gold and shadow. Plates of food kept appearing from somewhere inside the house. Roasted vegetables, handmade pasta, warm bread wrapped in cloth. The wine flowed like laughter, easy and endless. We sat elbow to elbow with people we'd only just met. Cousins of cousins, women with names that sounded like music, children darting between chairs. No one cared that our Italian was broken or that we couldn't follow every story. It didn't matter. They made space for us, not just at the table, but in the room, in the story, in the family. Dad sat across from me, a glass of Chianti in one hand, the other resting casually on the table like he'd done this 100 times. He looked lighter, younger, like something in him had settled. "They say Nono used to sit here," he said, nodding toward the middle of the table, "at every big family meal, right in that spot." I glanced at the empty chair next to the old stone wall. A plate had been set there anyway. "They left it for him," one of the cousins said quietly, catching my gaze. "Out of respect." My throat tightened. There was no agenda to the day, no schedule, just stories passed across dishes, translations whispered between bites, moments of understanding that didn't need words. One of the older aunts placed a photo album in my lap, a cracked leather cover filled with faces I recognized only by resemblance. A woman who looked just like me, standing in a vineyard. A boy with Dad's smile. I turned the pages slowly, as if rushing would break the spell. "I thought we were strangers," I said. A younger cousin leaned in. "No one's a stranger at this table," she said. "Just someone we haven't fed yet." By the time dessert arrived, honey-drenched pastries and espresso that could wake the dead, the sun was lower in the sky. The shadows had lengthened, the air cooler, softer. But no one moved. No one wanted it to end. Dad raised his glass toward me, eyes glinting in the warm light. To you, he said, for bringing us home. My heart thudded hard. To all of you, I replied, lifting mine, for reminding us we were never lost. Glasses clinked, a breeze stirred the vines above us, and for a moment it felt like time folded in on itself, past and present braided together at one long sun-drenched table in Tuscany. We had come looking for roots, but what we found was belonging. The letter came at the end of the meal, passed to us like a sacred object wrapped in linen. One of the older cousins, Lucia, placed it gently in front of my father with both hands, her eyes glistening. "This belonged to your grandfather," she said in careful English. "It was written just before he left for America. He gave it to his younger sister. She kept it her whole life." Dad stared at the bundle like it might break if he touched it too quickly. I watched his hands hover over the fabric, unsure, reverent. Then slowly he unfolded it. Inside was a single piece of yellowed paper, lined with delicate looping handwriting in faded black ink. The Italian was old-fashioned, but still legible. Lucia leaned over and translated softly, line by line, her voice carrying the weight of the past with a kind of grace I hadn't expected. "To my family, if you are reading this, I am far away now, but never gone. I carry you with me. I carry the soil of our hills in my shoes, the scent of our table in my memory, and the sound of your laughter in my chest. I go to build a future for us all. I go not to forget, but to honor where I came from. Let no one in this family ever feel like they do not belong. We are always a circle, no beginning, no end, just hands passing love forward." I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. Dad wiped his face with the back of his hand, silent, overwhelmed. He touched the corner of the letter, fingers trembling slightly, as if the paper itself might vanish if he wasn't gentle enough. "This was meant for all of us," he said, voice breaking, and I almost missed it. "No," I whispered. "You came back, and so did I." Lucia smiled through her own tears. "He wrote that to remind us. Family isn't about where you live. It's about who you carry and who carries you." We passed the letter around the table, each person touching it briefly like it was a blessing. Some nodded, some closed their eyes. No one rushed it. That night back at the little inn, Dad asked if he could frame the letter when we returned home. "I want it somewhere I can see it," he said. "When things get loud, when the past feels too far away." I nodded. "And when people forget that love isn't something you gatekeep." He looked at me. "We're not letting that happen again." We were far from where we started, but in that moment, with a century-old letter in our hands and the scent of olives still in the air, we knew. The past hadn't been lost. It had just been waiting. We sat on a low stone wall overlooking the valley, the evening light turning everything gold and forgiving. The village rooftops glowed in the distance, and the breeze smelled like lavender and dust. Dad passed me a slice of orange he'd peeled with the precision only a man who once packed school lunches with notes inside could manage. I took it, and we sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt full instead of awkward. "I wish I'd asked more," he said finally. I looked over. "About what?" "About you, about how you really were. I let your mother narrate so much of your life to me. I didn't realize how much I stopped looking for your version of things." The words hit gently, but deeply. He wasn't defending himself. He was just reckoning. "I didn't always make it easy to reach me," I said quietly. "Sometimes I was already halfway gone before anyone noticed." He shook his head. "But I should have noticed. When your mom started saying you were pulling away, I didn't push back. I didn't ask why. I just accepted it." "You trusted her," I said. "That's not a crime." "No," he said, "but it's not love either. not the kind you deserve. We both went quiet again. The wind shifted. Somewhere below us, someone was playing music, soft, distant, a woman's voice echoing through the hills. It made the moment feel more fragile. I think I kept trying to earn space in the family, I said. Like love had conditions. Like if I was good enough, helpful enough, invisible enough, maybe she'd let me stay. Dad's face crumpled just slightly. You should never have felt that. I know that now, I said, but I didn't then. He looked at me the way you do when you're seeing someone clearly for the first time. Not as a child, not as a daughter, but as a whole person with a history of quiet heartbreaks. I'm sorry for all the times I let her silence you, he said. I should have been your shield. You're here now, I said. That counts. He reached over and took my hand, rough and warm and familiar. I want to know you better, he said. The real you, not the version that fit into holiday dinners and group texts. I smiled, blinking hard. Then we've got time to make up for. He nodded, eyes on the horizon. I think this trip is the start of something new, not just for us, but for who we are to each other. And as the sun dipped below the hills, painting everything in soft orange and endless possibility, I knew he was right. We weren't fixing what was broken. We were building something new, together. The plane touched down just after midnight. The city lights glittered beneath us, cold and sharp, so different from the warmth of Tuscany's hills and long tables. I looked out the window as we taxied to the gate, and for a second, I wished we hadn't come back. Not because I didn't miss home, but because everything here would be the same, and we weren't. Dad glanced at me as we waited to deboard, his face tired but calm. He hadn't said much since the flight began, but I could feel the shift in him, lighter somehow, not fixed, just real. The terminal was quiet, all echoes and fluorescent light. We moved through it slowly, our footsteps strangely in sync. No rush, no reason to pretend we were eager to return. Outside, the air was crisp and dry, the kind of cold that wakes you up. Dad hailed a car, and we stood in silence as we waited. I felt the weight of my phone in my pocket, the unread messages I'd ignored since we landed in Florence. Tyler had sent a few check-ins. Mom had been silent. Part of me wanted to keep it that way. Part of me wanted answers she'd probably never give. I'm not going back to the house yet, Dad said as we got into the car. I need more time. I nodded. You don't owe anyone your return. He gave me a small smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Neither do you. We dropped him off at his apartment first. He insisted. The building was quiet, a soft yellow light glowing above the entrance. Before he got out, he paused and turned to me. If it ever feels like too much again, being the one who sees the truth, call me. I will. I mean it, Hayley. I know. He hugged me at the curb, not rushed, not distracted, just present. I watched him walk up the steps with his suitcase, then disappear behind the glass door. The car pulled away, and I leaned my head against the window. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun was just starting to stain the edge of the sky. I dropped my bags in the hall and stood there, surrounded by silence that felt too clean, too untouched. Everything here was as I'd left it, but I wasn't. The family I returned to was fractured. Honest, yes, but still cracked. Tyler was trying. Mom was waiting. For what? I didn't know. Forgiveness? Control? Maybe both. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what healing would look like for us. But I knew one thing. I wasn't walking back into the old roles. I had seen what freedom felt like, and I wasn't letting it go. The envelope was tucked between two bills, unmarked, hand-addressed, with my name in her familiar cursive. No return address, no stickers, no forced smile in the corner like she used to add to cards. Just Hayley in slanted blue ink that made my chest ache. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. My hands didn't shake, but something inside me did. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. No heading, no dear, just a beginning, like she'd started talking mid-thought. I've started seeing someone, a therapist. Her name is Dr. Geller. She's quiet, which is hard for me, and doesn't let me redirect conversations the way I used to. I hate it, and I need it. Already I felt off balance. She asked me to write a letter, not for forgiveness, just to name the damage. She said I have to stop rewriting history to make myself the hero. So I'm trying. I sat down at the kitchen table. What I did to you was cruel. I told myself I was protecting the family, but the truth is, I was protecting my control. I couldn't stand the way your father looked at you. I couldn't stand how easily you slipped into the spaces I used to fill. It wasn't your fault, but I punished you like it was. You planned something beautiful, and I erased it. I blinked hard, the words beginning to blur. I don't expect us to go back. I don't think we should. I broke something in you, and in all of us, but I want to be accountable now, even if it's late. You were always brave, even when I made you feel like you had to apologize for it. That line stayed with me. I read it twice, 3 times. I'm not asking for a relationship. I don't get to ask for that. But if you ever want to talk, without expectations, I'll be here, and I'll be quiet enough this time to hear you. There was no signature, just white space. I folded the letter again, carefully, like it might break. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Later that night, I placed it in the drawer next to the binder where the old trip plans had lived. 2 things I had worked so hard to shape. One taken from me, the other returned in pieces. I didn't text her. I didn't call. But for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of silence as punishment. It felt like a pause, a breath between endings and whatever might come next. And for now, that was enough. ChatGPT's I agreed to meet her at a cafe halfway between our houses. Neutral ground, public, but not crowded. A place where the conversation couldn't spiral into slammed doors or sharpened words. Just 2 cups of coffee between us and the space to try again. Or not. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands folded too neatly in her lap. She wore the blue scarf I remembered from childhood photos, the one I used to borrow without asking. It was strange how many memories a single piece of fabric could hold. I sat down across from her. No hug, no forced warmth, just a quiet nod. "Thank you for coming," she said. I stirred sugar into my coffee, not looking up. "I'm not here to pretend everything's okay." "I know," she said. "That's not what I want anymore." That was new. We talked slowly, like testing the strength of thin ice. She told me more about therapy, how it scared her, how it made her feel exposed. I told her about Italy, about the letter we found, the table in Tuscany, the way Dad cried without shame for the first time in years. "I've never seen him that free," I said. She looked down, her hands tightening slightly. "I never let him be." I didn't disagree. I let the silence stretch. "This isn't about earning your forgiveness," she said after a moment. "But if we're going to have any kind of relationship again, I want it to be honest." "So do I said, "which means I get to say no to some things, maybe to a lot of things." She nodded. "Okay. I won't come to every birthday. I won't play peacemaker with Tyler, and I won't pretend I'm not angry sometimes. You're allowed to be. And if you try to guilt me into folding back into the role I had before, I'll walk away." "I don't want you in that role," she said. "I want you as you are." That line held weight, maybe because for the first time, it felt like she meant it. We sat for a while longer, not trying to fill every silence. She asked if she could write sometimes, not long letters, just little things. I said maybe, not now, but maybe. When we stood to leave, she didn't reach for a hug. Instead, she said, I'll follow your lead. And for the first time in a long time, she did. I walked back to my car, heart steady, not hopeful exactly, not healed, but clear. This wasn't about rebuilding what we'd lost. It was about setting new lines in the sand and standing on my own side of them. Not to keep her out, but to keep myself in. ChatGPT's eye, the restaurant was quiet, tucked between a bookstore and an old record shop. The kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. No banners, no balloons, just a single table in the back corner, soft candlelight, and the kind of warmth that didn't need to be earned. Dad arrived first, early as always, wearing a new sweater I'd given him last Christmas and a grin that reached all the way up to his eyes. Tyler came next, carrying a bottle of wine and the awkwardness of someone still learning how to show up. We greeted each other with a brief hug, less stiff than the last time, more real. I had made the reservation myself. No spreadsheets, no planning committee, no group chat where my voice got lost. Just me. I'd chosen this place because it reminded me of Italy, the exposed brick, the simple food, the quiet joy in the room, a place where no one needed to perform. We ordered what we wanted, shared dishes, laughed more than I expected. Dad told the story again about the cousin who confused sunscreen with mayonnaise, and Tyler actually laughed, really laughed, not the tight, polite version. I didn't feel like I was holding the evening together. I didn't feel invisible. I felt present. Halfway through the meal, I reached into my bag and slid a small envelope across the table to Dad. He raised an eyebrow but didn't open it right away. What's this? A new itinerary, I said, smiling. He laughed, low and warm. You planning something again? Just a weekend this time, nothing big. But I found this tiny town near Lake Como, and I thought, maybe we could go. He opened the envelope and unfolded the short list. Train tickets, a hotel with a view, a walking path along the water. His eyes were glassy when he looked back up. I'd go anywhere with you. I nodded. I know. We finished dinner slowly, like time had softened around us. No one was in a rush. When dessert came, just one tiramisu with 3 spoons, we leaned in and shared it without fuss. As we walked out into the night air, Dad pulled me aside and placed a hand on my shoulder. This, he said quietly, was the best birthday I've ever had. Even without the surprise slideshow and custom cake? He smiled. Especially without those. Tyler gave me a little nod as he said goodbye, the kind that said he was still trying. And I appreciated that more than I could explain. We didn't all go home together. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. But we'd built something new, smaller, quieter, but true. And for once, that was the celebration. ChatGPT's eye. It hit me days later, after the birthday dinner, when the dishes were long washed, the candles blown out, and the quiet had returned. I was folding laundry of all things, standing in my apartment barefoot, when a familiar thought floated to the surface. But this time, it felt different. I hadn't just given my dad a trip. I'd started something. Something that cracked us open, yes, but also something that let light in. I had spent so long thinking the Italy trip was about proving something, that I was thoughtful, that I loved him, that I belonged in the family narrative. I'd crafted it with so much care, so much intention, thinking it would fix what was wrong. But it hadn't fixed anything, not directly. What it did was expose the fractures. It pulled them into the light, made them undeniable. The lies, the manipulation, the silences that had calcified into distance, it all surfaced. And for a while, it looked like everything was falling apart. But maybe that was what we needed, because after the collapse came truth, after the betrayal came choice, and after the heartbreak came the real gift, the permission to begin again, differently. The trip became a line in the sand, a before and after, not just for my dad and me, but for the roles we had all silently accepted for years. It forced conversations that had never been spoken aloud. It gave shape to grief we hadn't named. And somehow, through all of that, it opened a door. Not wide, not easily, but enough. Dad was lighter now, not because life was perfect, but because he had finally stopped pretending. He called more, laughed more, let himself be known, and I did too. Tyler and I were slowly rebuilding something, not the tight sibling bond we were never taught to nurture, but a mutual respect, a growing trust. We weren't dodging hard things anymore. We were acknowledging them. Even my mom, complicated as she was, had taken a step back and surprisingly started stepping in, not with control, but with quieter offerings. A text here, a gentle check in there, the start of something different, on my terms. That was the gift, not the itinerary, not the surprise, but the truth it uncovered, the healing it forced, the space it created. Sometimes I think back to the moment I clicked cancel on those original bookings, heartbroken, thinking I'd lost everything. I didn't know then what I'd set in motion. The trip was never just a gift for him. It was a door for all of us. And walking through it, together or apart, was the beginning of finally learning how to be a family, not the way we'd been told to be, but in a way we got to define for ourselves. That was the real gift, and it was still unfolding.